Hey everybody, Bob Olson here with Afterlife TV. You can find us at afterlifetv.com. This is where we talk about life after death and the meaningful questions you have about that subject. Today we're going to be talking about 4 past lives that I experienced recently within 1 week and how this changed my life. If you don't know me, I am a private investigator who's been investigating life after death, evidence of the afterlife, for 28 years. All started after my father died. I wanted to know where he went, if anywhere, and so I used my skills as a private eye to search for evidence of life after death. Here we are, 28 years later. I'm going through something kind of personally, privately, that I decide perhaps I can get some insight from, maybe a little healing, by having a past life regression. One of the things that I just want to say about this, these stories that I'm about to tell you, they're not really about the past, as weird as that may sound. What we learn from our past lives is really more about our current life, about now. And in fact, and I've had many past life regressions, any past life that I've visited always had something to teach me about what I was going through at that moment in time. And what's interesting about it, it's not always just the past life, it's also the scenes that you visit. When we say we have a past life regression, we don't necessarily experience the whole life. We experience maybe a few days and we know what was going on at that time in that person's lifetime, by visiting those few days, but we don't know everything about their life. So in essence, we could keep revisiting one person's lifetime, and we could revisit their lifetime as a boy. Say it's a guy, as a boy, as a young man, as a middle-aged man, as an older man, and these would all be different experiences that we could learn and grow from. The 4 that I had were, I would say each one I experienced maybe 3 scenes, 3 different days of each of these people's lives, and they all had something to teach me. And so because I've been getting a lot of past life regressions over the years, I think it's just helpful to recognize that while you can have these experiences out of curiosity, to me, it's really more about insight and healing. They really help us with the things that we're going through, and I think that's a great reason to do this work. So the 4 experiences that I had, none of them were that detailed, but the messages that they were there to show me were very clear. The first one was surprising to me. I recognized that I was in the lifetime of a Nazi officer. He was in like this gray Nazi uniform. He was it was very clean, very pristine. And yet there was a contrast because there was just the city was in rubble. It was a German city. I didn't see any bodies. I didn't see any of that kind of carnage. But what I had a knowing, and this is one of the interesting things about having these experiences, I had a knowing that this was the last day of World War II. The war had ended, and the U.S. soldiers had taken over the city that this Nazi officer was in. And he knew it was over, and what was really fascinating to me, having experienced this, was that he was just at peace. He was just so happy it was over. What I didn't see, but I knew happened, again, it was another knowing, was that he was going to take his life, that he took his life rather than being captured by the U.S. soldiers. One of the things that you do when you have a past life regression and you experience different scenes from that person's life is, on the day of their death, you usually rise up and you learn a lesson, usually a couple lessons. The lesson that person learned from their own lifetime. And there's usually more than one, but you usually learn the key lesson. And then the reason that I, Bob Olson, was experiencing that lifetime on that particular day. One of the things that I could feel was that he had a deep regret. I mean, just profoundly deep regret of being a follower, that he didn't live up to his own principles and morals, which probably would have resulted in imprisonment or death for him anyway, but he would have probably felt better about himself if he had. And instead, because of fear, and it was clear to me that this was all due to fear. It might have been fear of him being harmed. It might have been fear of family members being harmed, but it certainly was due to fear that he followed what was expected of him, all the way up into being a Nazi officer. And I could sense the regret he had for doing that after his passing. And the reason I recognized this was shown to me was because my lifetime in this life has been completely the opposite. And it explained to me how I've always had a lifelong resistance to this sort of groupthink or cliques or joining. And it's just not something that I've ever done. And it helped me to understand why that sort of came naturally to me. So that was the Nazi officer experience. That was the first one. The second past life experience that I had was as a woman in her 30s. I think it was early 1800s. She was joyful. She was peaceful. She couldn't have been happier. And I remember that I saw her house, and it was a very humble residence. She was dressed where at first I thought she was a servant, but then I realized this was just her home dress. But the joy and the sense of peace that I felt for her was immense. And she was making some sandwiches, and she took the sandwiches across this meadow, outside her house, across this meadow, and into this field where her husband was working, and I assume he was on a horse. All I knew was he was up high. And she was handing him the sandwiches, and the love and joy that I even felt from her husband was incredible. There wasn't a lot to that lifetime. It was a very simple experience that I had. But when we went to the last day of her life and we rose above after her passing, the lesson for me was to remind me that we don't always have to have a big purpose to have love and joy and meaning in our lifetime. And this is important because I was going through this period where I was really trying to decide what is it that I'm supposed to be doing in terms of the work that I do, because there's only so much time to do everything. And when you realize that it doesn't have to be this grand thing, that a simple life like this woman farmer was enough. It was great reflection for me while I was going through this. So that was the great insight that I gained from her lifetime. And so then the third experience that I had, now I had two past lives experiences in one day with the same regressionist. And the first one was as a Native American boy. I knew I was 17 years old. I knew that I had just come back from hunting. I had a bow and arrow with me. And when I came back to my tribe, everybody had disappeared. Now, I, as Bob Olson, had a knowing that that white soldiers had come and just taken everybody away. Women, men, children had just taken everyone away. But because the 17-year-old boy wasn't there, he was out hunting, he wasn't part of it. I also had a knowing that the 17-year-old boy's parents had died earlier in life, and because of that, he had somehow got separated from the tribe that he did grow up in, even as a young man. And so this tribe that just disappeared on the day that I was seeing had taken him in, that sort of adopted him. And he didn't feel a real close connection because he didn't grow up with them. He was sort of an outsider coming into the tribe, but he recognized the kindness and his gratefulness for them taking care of him. But now they too were gone. And so we moved forward into his lifetime. We didn't know, but it turned out to be the last day of his life. He was fishing. He heard a noise. He turned around. There was 2 white cowboys who were accusing him of trespassing. The boy was trying to explain that he would leave, and they just shot him and left him for dead. And he died. And what I learned from that was that he was showing me the pain of living without a strong sense of belonging and community. And it helped for me, the message for me was to help me understand why I crave community in my life and why it's so important. And I have recognized, in one of the reasons that I was having all these experiences, I recognized that it was missing from my life. Now, I couldn't have articulated it before these regressions, and so this is what it was helping me to recognize, was that, I do a lot of work here on the internet, and so I'm not in contact with people more, directly. And as a result, that leaves a certain distance between you and I. And even though you leave, these wonderful comments that I so appreciate, it's really not the same as really being able to see how my work impacts you in your day-to-day lives. And so this is one of the things that these lifetimes was showing me through all these experiences. So that was the third one. And my fourth and final experience that I had the same day as the young and Native American boy was the opposite of that. And now I was going to see what it felt like to have a strong sense of community. And so I came into the lifetime as an English minister. And he was a young, in his 30s. I knew that he had a wife and he had 2 children, a boy and a girl. This was on the day that he was actually becoming the minister for his church. He had been an assistant minister, and the elderly minister who had been the head minister was stepping down, and this young minister was now going to be the head minister. And it was interesting. He gave a sermon. We went to another scene where he was giving a sermon. He was giving a sermon about things like love and kindness and service. And he knew that some of the people in his congregation weren't sure how they felt about him talking about these more general messages rather than talking about sin and hell and damnation and all the things that the previous minister, the elderly minister, always talked about. And I remember feeling that this young minister was like, well, they'll get used to it. he had complete confidence that everybody was going to be just fine with his more general messages that didn't necessarily include the dogma that most people were used to, but they were still important messages about love and kindness and service. So one of the things that happened, we moved forward. The minister and his wife lost their son, who was the youngest child. He passed from some sickness, and I got to see how the community came together to support him and his wife. This lifetime was showing me the value of face-to-face teaching, teaching me that it would probably be good for me to get out and speak more in public, and where, in forums where I could actually see and touch, maybe some hugs of the people, and get a sense, like I said, of how my work positively affects people, comforting their grief, giving them a sense of peace, maybe bringing them from fear to inner peace during difficult times in their life, based on me teaching not just what I've learned about the afterlife, but what I've learned about life while investigating the afterlife. All of these experiences really helped me to understand, especially those last two, that, I long to see the ripple effects of my work and to think about how I might go about doing that. One of the things that I knew that I wanted to do was get back to Afterlife TV. The last thing I'll end with is simply that I think of past life experiences and including the different scenes that you might see. Sometimes you see 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 scenes within one lifetime. I think of them as puzzle pieces. And we take these puzzle pieces and we put them together. And for this example of this video, these 4 lifetimes and the different scenes that I saw in them, but certainly the main lessons that I gained from each one were like puzzle pieces that created a puzzle that was showing me a different way. One, to help me understand why I chose this, why one might say, even had the courage to teach about the afterlife. When I was a private investigator, everybody was fascinated, and it was just a cool profession. When I started investigating the afterlife, some people became afraid of me. They didn't want to be around me anymore. And I'm not saying like close friends, but relatives suddenly thought that I was a little weird, and because they were highly religious, for some reason thought that I was doing something that was the devil's work, something like that. But it wasn't as popular as being a private eye, being an afterlife investigator. And so that first lifetime showed me why I might have made those choices and had the courage to go from this very popular career into this one that you just never really knew how people were going to respond. And then the woman farmer, really teaching me, hey, it doesn't have to be this big grand, thing, grand purpose, that you can feel a sense of peace and joy and meaning from some of the simplest parts of life and just doing what you do. She certainly showed me that. And then the Native American boy showing me, an extreme example of what I experienced, of him not feeling any sense of belonging or community. And then the minister having the complete opposite of that, really encouraging me to find a way to bring community into my life. None of this is really about trying to convince anybody about reincarnation or any of that. It's just, the thing is, there's a lot of people who don't even really believe in past lives. They see it more as a metaphor, and that's fine too. The whole purpose of it is, even if you have these experiences and you don't believe, they're really past lives, you can still gain from them in the way that I just showed you, and look at it as like a therapeutic exercise, that maybe it's just psychology, speaking in metaphors, but yet look what healing and insight that can be gained from them. For those of you who have had past life regressions and had experiences, I would love to hear about it in the comments. Certainly share with me and other people, because people who are watching this would love to hear more, I'm sure. And if you have any questions, then certainly ask in the comments, or just let me know if my work has been helpful to you over the years. And I'm sorry that I disappeared for a while. I've been doing a lot of things, and I kind of got away from the videos, but now I'm back, and I'm happy to be back. And thank you for joining me. And I hope you'll like this video, and so that YouTube will show you my videos, any new videos that come up in the future. I look forward to seeing you again soon. All right. Thank you.